A very good evening and welcome to this special webinar series on celebrating diversity. Today, we are focusing on persons with disabilities, that is, including persons with disabilities at the workplace. Thank you to everyone for taking the time out to join us today. I am Jinal Jain, my pronouns are she and her, and I will be your host for today. We have with us Sandhya Ramesh, who's the Head Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Great Place to Work Institute, India, in conversation with Priyanka Mohanty from StarTech. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, we will be speaking about key challenges in hiring persons with disabilities at the workplace and how to empower them and how to overcome these challenges. We will also learn about StarTech's framework and monitoring mechanisms of including PWDs at the workplace. Towards the end, we will also do a Q&A session and we will have a very interesting rapid fire round. A quick introduction of our panelists. I say quick, but it seems like an impossible task because the number of hats that Priyanka wears is quite endless, but I'm going to give it a try. Apart from being the Global Diversity and Inclusion Champion for StarTech, Priyanka Mohanty is the Vice President, Global Corporate HR Head. She looks after the global talent management, engagement, and diversity, equity, inclusion function with respect to multicultural, multilingual, and socio-economically diverse 46,000 plus strong workforce for StarTech. StarTech is an NYSE listed entity spread across 13 countries and has around 46 global locations. Priyanka is extremely passionate about the cause of D&I, especially with the empowerment of PWDs and gender inclusivity. She has been conferred with multiple recognitions such as Women HR Leader by Business World, 22 Women Achievers in 2022 by HR Association of India, Women Achiever Award by ASSOCHAM, DEI Leader by Women's Leadership Forum of Asia, and many more. I think I need to catch a breath while I complete your awards. She's also highly instrumental in StarTech being conferred with multiple awards such as ASSOCHAM, AON, SHRM, Great Place to Work, including the National Award from the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment for empowerment of persons with disabilities. Priyanka, it is an honor to have you here with us today, and we really look forward to having this conversation with you. For everyone who's there attending the webinar, during the course of our conversation, please do use the Q&A tab as and when you have questions. I would like to hand over the spot to Sandhya now to begin the conversation.
Thank you, Jinal, and very warm welcome to everyone. And no matter where you're joining in from the globe, we're so excited to have you as part of this conversation, because I think the minute we are able to engage people in a conversation, we know half our battle is won. Because today we have Priyanka joining us. Priyanka is, such a champion of an ally of inclusion that you can't help but walk away inspired from this session to take, if not 3 actions, at least 1. Which I'm sure you're going to, take back into your workplace or even personally, right? And I think that's the beauty of everything that Priyanka and her team have been able to carry out at StarTech. Priyanka, thank you so much for continuing to indulge our requests for you to keep coming back and sharing with the Great Place community on, all the efforts, behind the screens at StarTech.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandhya and Jinal, for the lovely introduction. I think I am talking to 2 stalwarts, Sandhya and Jinal, who are so passionate about DEI. I did receive the DEI newsletter yesterday, and I was going through that as well. So I think kudos and hats off to you both as well and the entire team. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Priyanka. Thank you. So while as inclusion practitioners, DEI practitioners, we hear a lot of information about, say, organization taking goals on, gender diversity, for example, or, having a better generational mix within their organization, or having a goal for persons with disabilities. I think StarTech has been one organization, and it's continued to intrigue me on how they are able to create that balance. They actually follow something called a hexagonal framework: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think a couple of highlights that I have noticed about StarTech's journey in DEI. One, I think big audacious goals when it comes to PWD hiring and inclusion, something that we do not see as actively in a lot of organizations today. And notwithstanding some of the challenges that we commonly hear about, whether it is talent availability, whether it is infrastructure, reasonable accommodation, as one may call it. But I think that's one thing that's always stood out, and that for us comes up very clearly as an intention to be more inclusive. As most of you are aware, StarTech is also recognized as one among India's best workplaces in diversity, equity, and inclusion by Great Place to Work. I think the second thing that stands out for us out of the hexagonal framework is how there is already an integration of intersections, as one may call it. So while some of us still focus on gender diversity and hiring, StarTech has taken a step ahead and said, how can we actually integrate indigenous women into our workforce, right? And I think with that, little piece of context, I would love for Priyanka maybe to share a little bit more about the overall, DEI philosophy, what inspires this hexagonal framework, and, how do we ensure that everything that we do under the aegis of what we have under DEI rolls up to this hexagonal framework?
Sure, absolutely, Sandhya. I think you're absolutely right. When we started or when we ventured into this DI journey, I think it's almost been a decade now, 10 years back, maybe somewhere around 2010. So that time, we had decided, to make a very conscious effort to move into an outcome-based model. So, while we defined the various facets that you very nicely, cited out, we also thought that attaching a commitment to the philosophy, that would really make a big difference, and I think also would make the journey sustainable. So when we started, we very strongly believed that diversity in the workplace is, of course, no longer a nice to have phenomenon. It definitely will yield a competitive business advantage. And I think that's how we started the journey, by clearly defining this hexagonal model, which of course is a global framework. And there are tweaks to it as and when, we sort of customize it as per geos also. But if you consider the global framework, yes, from the very beginning, we decided that when we venture in this journey, we will clearly define our 6 key indicators. And, I'll very briefly touch upon these 6 indicators. First, of course, is and a major and a significant aspect is persons with disabilities. I think when we ventured in this journey, Sandhya, there were, we had 0 persons with disabilities. But today, in 2022, I'm so happy and so glad and really humbled to say, that over the last 9 years, we've kind of hired and made, more than 5,000 persons with disabilities employable in this journey. So people have come, people have joined, there were skilling programs, there were upskilling programs, there were engagement programs. And at any given point in time, we were very clear that 1.5% of our global workforce will be persons with disabilities. And, we have made some stride in that area. Of course, while we defined the philosophy, as I said, commitments were very clearly laid out for each facet. The second facet, Sandhya, will be your, inclusion of different genders. So if I specifically talk of, male, female, there was a time a couple of years back, when our gender ratio was around 65:35. But I think a lot of initiatives, a lot of engagement activities and conscious efforts, led to that being 50:50 now. So we do have a 50:50 gender ratio when it comes to male, female. And when we talk of inclusion of different genders, for example, targeting the LGBTQI population, so we do run campaigns in specific geographies where, there is a need to run this campaign. Then, of course, the third facet, something which I'll quickly cover is, inclusion of socially and economically disadvantaged people. So, we consciously make an effort, to venture into tier 3 and tier 4 cities, so that 35% of our people will comprise of socially and economically disadvantaged. And of course, the fourth facet is CALD, which we call as culturally and linguistically diverse. So we believe that, every employee or every person who joins our organization contributes to this facet of diversity. So, we comprise of 78 nationalities, and we serve our customers in 38 different languages. And there are very targeted initiatives also for this diversity facet. Then fifth, of course, is a very important facet when it comes to the type of industry that we are in. 90% of our population is millennials. So we make a very conscious effort, to target this facet of diversity, which we call as the generational diversity. So around 3% of our population, belong to this category. So we believe that, it has to be a combination of will and a combination of wisdom. And of course, the last, the facet is, inclusion of indigenous people. So I think this is a commitment of giving back to the land, where we operate out of. So we believe that around 70 to 80% of our people need to belong to this, diversity facet, so that we contribute back to the land and we try and employ people of the soil from where we operate out of. So this, Sandhya, is a very clear definition or a brief of the hexagonal model. While of course there are certain enablers that we have defined along the way, there are challenges, there are monitoring mechanisms, and there is an impact, which I'm sure we'll converse during the next maybe 40 minutes.
Absolutely. And if I had to take away, like a couple of pieces, and that continue to get reinforced for me, Priyanka, every time we talk about the hexagonal framework. One is, I think, the ability to acknowledge intersectionality, which is just the reality of all of us and, the system that we operate in, right? I think the second thing that's so wonderful to see about your DEI framework, it talks so well to the business that you operate in, right? And is so closely linked to the business objectives. And I think the third piece that kind of stands out is, while you are a global organization, the framework allows for the flexibility to localize some of your DI efforts and truly acknowledge, the presence, the geographical presence and the geographical context of, where each of your offices come from. And for me, I think every time I walk away from that conversation about the hexagonal framework, there's something or the other I pick up, Priyanka. So thank you for helping us do this the nth time. Today, I think our conversation is also going to be zooming in a little more on persons with disability and inclusion of persons with disability in the workplace. Priyanka, as a country, I know we've had fairly clear infrastructure guidelines when it comes to accessibility for persons with disability. Yes, I think there is definitely opportunity and scope for different organizations and different individuals to review whether it's being implemented as effectively. But I think the last 2 years has also created the need and the space for digital accessibility. I think not only from an employee lens, but we are increasingly seeing more customers who could be visually impaired or have any kind of accessibility needs and requirements actually take very strong stands against organizations who have not been able to cater to different sections of, the community, right? Priyanka, if we had to maybe start off just on the structural front, how can organizations be more accessible digitally? And what do you think are some clear must-dos that they need to have when it comes to technological accessibility?
Absolutely. Sandhya, I'll be very honest here, and I absolutely echo with what you said, that over the last few years, digital accessibility, or what we call, accessibility in the online space, that has become a very, very pertinent, discussion which is going on around within, many organizations, government bodies, and a lot other, many other stakeholders. But to be very honest, I think, we have a long way to traverse when it comes to digital accessibility. The journey has definitely begun, Sandhya, the journey has definitely begun, but I think venturing into digital accessibility space also needs to be rolled out like a perfect, change management initiative. So if you ask, when it's very, very similar to your hiring. So when you start hiring persons with disabilities, you actually roll it out as a change management initiative. You form a business case, you create enablers, you create engagement initiatives, and finally you decide a business case. And I think digital accessibility, it needs to be no different. So, okay, before that, I think just for the, to make it very, very simple, we all need to understand what accessibility is, first of all. I think it is a measure. It is the extent actually to which a product or a service can be used by a person with disability, or as effectively as it would be used by a person without. So I think the first step here is you need to make a business case for your accessibility. And when you do that, I think, of course, two things that you need to keep in mind. One, of course, is your principles of universal design, where you need to design your product or your service or your software in a way that it is equally usable by persons with disabilities as well as persons without disabilities. So the advantage that you will have here is that you will need to eliminate creating multiple products or multiple services. So that is one business, business case that you need to show your stakeholders. And the second, of course, which we all keep talking about, is your reasonable accommodation. So make certain modifications to a system, a process, so as to enable persons with disabilities to enjoy that without causing any undue hardship to the provider of that facility. So once we form a business case, I think the next step for accessibility is let's create ways to engage with different types of stakeholders. So regarding discussions about accessibility solutions, and let's look for simple ways to ensure that accessibility is part of every stakeholder's vocabulary. When you talk to business, you will realize that then everybody needs to understand why we need accessibility. And also, there are a lot of talks going around. In fact, many of us are not aware of the technicalities which are involved in digital accessibility. So if you read laws and if you read certain guidelines, the WCAG, which is your Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, I think that is the closest, or that is the best available framework for digital accessibility, which is published by your W3C, which is a worldwide web consortium. So, in India, of course, when you refer to this Right to Persons with Disabilities Act, there are certain guidelines definitely mentioned. But, organizations, when they venture into this digital accessibility space, people like us, we are not aware of the technicalities. Because, there are certain guidelines, the WCAG also establishes certain levels of conformance. So it could be your least strict, which starts with level A, then it could move to the next level, and then it could move to the third level. So right now, I think we are dealing with WCAG 2.1 and conformance to the second level. But such technical details, a lot of organizations will not be aware. So we, who are trying to venture into this space, we need to take probably, help of organizations who excel in this or who have an idea. So just to give an example, Barrier Break is one such example. Sarthak NGO, of course, they will all help you, in understanding, how closely we can get digital accessibility to our persons with disabilities within the organization, and also form a business case around it. So I think it's, we are taking baby steps towards it, but the journey has started, and I think we really you need to move a long way in going towards it.
I know, and I think, Priyanka, those baby steps are, I would say, definitely, strong steps. And see, I think one common challenge, like one, is this entire structural challenge, right? Which is just the, because we have been used to just a certain way of operating, right? Without having as much reasonable accommodation. Integrated just into our systems, into our processes, into even our behavior, for example. Organizations go through this entire unlearning and relearning process, right? So I think, like you rightly mentioned, being able to lay out an entire plan, not to feel very overwhelmed that everything needs to be rehauled, actually take it step by step. The entire exercise in itself needs to be, kind of program managed fairly well. The other structural challenge, Priyanka, that we've commonly heard from organizations, and given you're also, in the ITES industry, I think it'd be wonderful to hear from you, is the availability of, talent of persons with disability, right, in this particular talent pool. So one, how do you ensure that this does not become a resort, right? A resort of sorts for somebody to be saying, okay, we did not meet our goals because talent was not available. We're not able to meet that representation because we're not finding talent. Because that seems to be the immediate go-to area for leaders, organizations, sometimes even managers to not have a certain level of diversity within their team. And you also spoke about how you had moved the needle from 35 to 50 on gender, which is also not a very easy thing to do. So how did you navigate some of these challenges, Priyanka, and what was the messaging that went back every time you were hit with the wall of lack of talent in underrepresented communities?
All right. So Sandhya, let me just try and focus my discussion here on persons with disabilities. If I can just, take that as an example.
Fabulous.
So, I think when we started hiring, yes, there were a lot of challenges. And you're absolutely right. The first and the foremost challenge that we were facing is availability of, employable population. Where do we go and where do we find them? Because at that point in time, very, very few organizations, very few NGOs, ventured into this. So that was a first challenge, of course, followed by eliminating unconscious bias, and third was accessibility. We'll deal with those two later, but coming back to your specific question as to how did we deal with hiring challenges, there are three steps to it basically. Before hiring, when we talk of hiring persons with disabilities, there is a need to understand that there have to be methods which are beyond the conventional methods. So while conventional methods are there, you also need to experiment. There are certain experimental methods that we had applied when we ventured into this journey. But before even venturing into this hiring, I think there are 2 or 3 parameters that, pre-hiring, if what we call requisites to pre-hiring persons with disabilities, first and foremost, and it's very frequently talked about, but I think it's the most important thing, which is your leadership commitment and your commitment to equal employment opportunity. So when, and as an organization, when you hire, you really need to talk to, you need to influence, you need to make your clients, you need to make your, supply chain, you need to make your industry peers understand, you need to make government bodies understand that, yes, this is Static's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they need to respect that commitment. Because unless that happens, and leadership takes the lead here, because if that does not happen, and if we hire persons with disabilities, then sustaining them would be, a big problem. So I think it should all, even before we venture into hiring, 2 or 3 pre-hiring requisites would be leadership commitment. Second would be, formulating an equal employment opportunity policy. So I think we need to very consciously formulate that policy of zero discrimination. And then third is attaching targets. Even before you venture into hiring, you need to understand that, yes, these are the targets that I need to hire. So let's say 1.5% of my global workforce will be PWDs. So then these goal sheets need to be embedded into the HR managers goal sheets, and we in turn, of course, communication, sensitization, awareness, that was an ongoing process. Now, moving into hiring. So hiring, as I said, we see conventional methods when we say it could be advertisement, referral, job fair, walk-in. But I think when we specifically talk about persons with disabilities, what are various methods that, we adopted as an organization to move the needle in this aspect? So I think one of the few things that we did is partner with NGOs, because, they have ready to move, they have employable persons with disabilities present with them. So partner with NGOs, partner with state employment exchanges. Of course, you will be hiring from universities, college campuses, etc. But you can also hire, contact your, I think, social workers, freelance social workers, and they will provide you with their databases. Contact hospitals for the database. Advertise by way of, in fact, we had our HR managers go to areas where we thought that, we will find them. So they distributed pamphlets there. Then train your recruiters and line managers on affirmative action so that they understand that, yes, this is a commitment to hiring PWDs. And last but not the least, try and formulate, we had something called as, years back, we had something called as employability program when we hired this, started this journey. So here, employees started referring persons with disabilities for any specific position or role. So one is, of course, the experimental methods, but we need to move the needle in these experimental methods. And another thing, Sandhya, which I would like to add here is to make business understand, we need to show them a certain cost impact. So, so years back, when we started this journey, we did something which was called as the cost sharing model. So here what happens was, so when we tied up with a particular NGO and with, VRCs, which are vocational rehabilitation centers. So what happens is, so this NGO, of course, they used to provide, I think, computer training to a certain set of people. Then these vocational rehabilitation centers, they used to provide, their infrastructure, and we used to send our trainers as to train them on what are the BPO skills that are required. So it could be language, it could be comprehension, it could be any sort of skills which are required for a BPO. So once these three came into being, so when we were able to hire the persons with disabilities, we had a ready pool of candidates to hire from. So how did that help us? That firstly helped us in reducing our hiring time. Secondly, reducing our cost per hire. And third is we had a ready pool of candidates who were already trained. So our training throughput was also high. And these three factors we were able to show to our business. So then, and that's the time when, yes, we were able to convince business that, yes, let's hire them. So one, of course, was, the softer aspect, which is communication, sensitization, awareness. But we also needed to show them hard facts, the cost sharing model that we tried to show them. So these are just a few examples that I thought I'll share with you. But of course, apart from that, we always used to, converse with persons with disabilities, like, tell stories of how our company will support them. So, when candidates come to us, there is something called as information brief that we used to give them. So, and this is just a suggestion that, maybe organizations can use this information brief where, you talk about your company's commitment to DI, the various, maybe the outreach programs that you do, the sensitization programs that you do, how diversity is a very clear core value in a company. So we have 8 core values, and diversity is one of the core values also. Show them case studies and show them stories of your own persons with disabilities who have grown within the company. So I think, these things will really help you move the needle towards hiring.
Thanks, Priyanka. And I think can so connect to the the passion with which you speak about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and at the same time, while it's important to have the entire, like we say, the activist mindset, it is so important to balance it out with a very realist mindset, right? And help influence your influencers within the organization. And I think that's what helps you compound a lot more benefits, when it comes to the change that you're trying to drive. Priyanka, any story of, a person with disability that you would like to share, and their growth story at StarTech that, you'd like to share with the audience here?
There are so many stories, and in fact I wish I could share that book with you, but we had also compiled a lot of stories on persons with disabilities. We had sought testimonials not only from within the organization, but we actually reached out to their families and we sought testimonials, and we compiled it into a book which we call as Asha in the Home. So that was widely distributed, but if I could state, there are a lot of examples, but one or two examples I can give you. We have, and this person is somebody, of course, I can't take the name, but he is based out of Pune location. And when he joined us as an agent. And today he's completed almost 7 years within the organization. Why I cite this example is when he joined us as a frontline staff, so a person who takes calls as an agent at a normal process, at a mass process. And over the years, he actually moved roles. So he moved roles from agent, he moved to quality. And from quality, he moved to training. And today he trains people on premium processes. So, there are 2 types of processes, a mass process and premium process. So today, and I cite that example because, I really look up to that person, and over a period of 7 years, how, he has an, what do you call it? I mean, he's just given an example to not only, the entire organization, but I think to the community in general as well. Apart from that, also, if you would like to hear and see more stories, they are there in the public domain. So, and I can share with you, maybe post this, when CNBC TV18, they had, documented had a documentary, on persons with disabilities, where they showcased our organization. There we had, 3 persons with disabilities who shared their stories, and that is there in the public domain. Then we have, stories of people when we partnered with CII, and we published a case study on how, inclusive response to persons with disabilities. Their stories are there in the public domain. Recently, we concluded a video, I think, recording with Sarthak NGO, where, as part of the DEI series, they came to our location and they, interviewed a few persons with disabilities. So their stories will also be shortly out. So it's all there in the public domain, and I'll be happy to share those stories separately with you and Gino post this webinar.
Thank you, Priyanka. And, I'm going to actually, I see so many audience questions coming in. So I'm going to shorten my agenda for this conversation. But I think last question to you, Priyanka, because we've spoken a lot about structural accommodation. We've spoken a lot about affirmative hiring actions and, how organizations can have not only a short-term strategy, which is about ready talent, but two, have experimental models, three, have a long-term partnership with NGOs and other organizations in skill building that that kind of also appeal to the overall business climate. Priyanka, going back to that quick example that you shared, I think one piece that I'd definitely be keen to know of was how did you differentiate, or how different is it to have a talent development program for persons with disabilities, as opposed to one, is it any different when we compare able-bodied and persons with disabilities, and if there is, then how do you bring out that nuance difference? And I'll close with that last question, post which I'll hand it over to Jinal for Q&A.
Yeah. So, Sandhya, when you talk specifically of talent development, and so there are 2 or 3 things that are related to it. So whether it is different for different people, let's say for persons with disabilities, since we are focusing here, the engagement programs, definitely, yes, those are different. And we try and we combine. So for example, let's say, when we started this, now, of course, we are all in the same page because we moved a long way, but I'm talking of when we started this and organizations are planning, we used to kind of tweak our, the IGP process and also the employability process. So as I said, when we hire persons with disabilities, it's very, very important, to also skill them beforehand so that, the throughput is more and also they're able to perform well in the production floor. And post that, we have specific engagement initiatives, which we call as talent management initiatives for them, so that they are able to, sustain in that role. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples, skill development I've already spoken about, how we tie up with various NGOs to do that. But, if you talk of focused engagement initiatives, I think very, very important are providing platforms, for them, for us to listen to them actually. And, be it career growth or be it, mentoring, be it rewards and recognition, or be it simply, they cascading their own stories to external bodies. And when I say external bodies, we've had clients who have visited us, our clients, to understand, our story of persons with disability and how they have grown within that. So there are 2 parts to your question. If we target a specific talent development program for persons with disabilities, no, because we do not believe, in creating any sort of discrimination, be it in terms of, performance management, R&R, or recruitment, or at any given point of employee life cycle. We do not discriminate at all. So we have programs which are equal, for everybody, but we do have targeted engagement initiatives. And when I say engagement initiatives, there are a number of initiatives which I can cite, and probably, I can answer them if there are questions pertaining to that. But we customize the engagement programs, but as far as developmental programs are concerned, we do provide equal access to everybody as far as talent development is concerned. Sandhya.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Gina. Gina, I see the questions pouring in, so yes, over to you.
Yes, I think I'm going to start with a random question because it is linked to what you were just speaking about. Someone has spoken about how diversity is always good to celebrate in the beginning. Just after spending some time and after a certain time, people start getting indulged in different scenarios where they don't understand each other's culture. So I'm guessing persons with disabilities might not understand the other employees, and employees might not understand the other groups. So how do we manage this diversified mindset and resolve conflicts which might arise from this scenario?
Okay, I think that's a brilliant question. But I have to differ here because, yeah, I think if when you venture into this journey, you will see, and if you put in a lot of effort, and I think one thing which I also missed out in the conversation was, kind of a very well-defined monitoring mechanism which you should have. So once you have all these, things in place, I don't think anything can stop you from, making it sustainable. And to just be very specific to that question, I think that you need to have your enablers very clearly defined. And when I say enablers, 4 or 5 things that comes to my mind are, when I said leadership commitment, that is the power of influencing your people, your clients, your supply chain, and your people within. Then, of course, is your target-based commitment. That is number 2. Number 3 is your accessibility features when I talk about persons with disabilities. Number 4 is your targeted engagement initiatives. And number 5 is a perfect monitoring mechanism. Follow these 5, and as I said, nothing can stop you from making the journey sustainable, and your people will themselves come and talk about hiring and empowering persons with disabilities, and they'll be role models.
Thank you. I think that definitely makes sense, and I hope we've been able to answer that question. The second question I would like to request you to briefly explain the hexagonal framework in a very brief way, because all of the questions are pertaining to that, and there are questions about what exactly is the hexagonal model. Following that, there's a question about what are the pros and cons, according to you, of the framework so far.
Right. So let me take the second part of the question first. Actually, when we started, when we thought that we will delve into this model, or we will start with this model, this question came to our mind. Should we just start with 2 aspects, that is persons with disabilities and gender? Because that time, that was the most talked about diversity facets way back in 2010. And this question came to us actually, that whether we should do this or we should go for a global framework which comprises of other facets as well. But at that point in time, we said, no, if we need to go, then we need to venture it out, fully, and we need to do justice to it by defining commitments around it, and also through our monitoring mechanisms. So yes, I think to start with, so if I say the advantages have been manifold, and I'll talk of let's say a couple of business advantages also, because we've and if you say how to tackle those challenges and how to create an environment, that can only happen through communication, awareness, and sensitization. But a lot of the business impact, if I talk specifically of persons with disabilities, when we started hiring, a lot of people came and they told us that I don't think they'll be able to perform in the way others are able to perform. There'll be more of attrition. There'll be more of absenteeism. In BPO, absenteeism and shrinkage is something where people don't report that day for a call. Our metrics go up and down. So we need to ensure that people come. So PWDs cannot commute to work. PWDs will have a business disadvantage. They will not perform well. They will have more attrition. But over a period of time, and if you see their quality of work, their output, their discipline, the attrition, the cost per hire, everything is so favorable to business. And when we talk of metrics also, we have tried to link that because in BPO, in a service industry like ours, attrition is directly related to your revenues, your money. So when we try and show the business advantage, we do focus on cost per hire, we do focus on attrition, we do focus on absenteeism, and all these factors. So I think monitoring these, and also the engagement level, I would like to talk here about when we annually do our employee engagement survey, we do have a specific segment on diversity and inclusion. So if you see the scores, they're really good scores that we have. And also, apart from that, there is another thing that we do in monitoring mechanism, and I think that will also benefit the audience here. That is called as diversity scan survey. So diversity scan survey here. I think when there are 2 aspects to it. When you want to understand, and this is also related to the first question that you asked me, how do we sustain it? Over a period of time, when you run such surveys, what happens is this survey, of course, is just, it has 34, 35 questions, and it's divided into 2 parts. And there we try and understand the employee perception of diversity, the penetration of diversity, and its impact on customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and business performance. So when we get these scores, we perform a very detailed analysis around that, and that helps us, create the path for the next couple of years, also the future path. And I would like to end it here by saying that I'll give a very nice example. In 2018, I think when we when Aegis and Static, we merged into a combined entity, and that time we acquired 5 geos: US, Honduras, Jamaica, Canada, and Philippines. At that point in time, when we wanted to establish this model there, we ran this survey. And we got where people felt comfortable to come and identify themselves to a particular facet of diversity. So this survey gives that opportunity as well. So we found a lot of persons with disabilities who came and who identified themselves, LGBTQ people who came and identified themselves. And then what happened is, from a place where there were 0 persons with disabilities, once we identified the findings from the survey, over the next 1 year, I think in October 2020, 1.5 years later, we were actually awarded by the government of Ohio there, for hiring persons with disabilities in our Ohio center in US. So I think that, created a lot of happiness, not only within US, but also within the entire organization. That's actually how you create an impact also, from the survey. So.
Makes sense. I think another question is a lot about infrastructure. Things like for organizations who are just starting out, or the latest, there were some government guidelines that came out, the harmonized guidelines or the WACG. What are some of the issues that your organization faced while implementing those? And at the same time, how can our organizations who are just starting out in their infrastructure journey can keep in mind while implementing that?
Yes, I think accessibility was one of the top 3 challenges that we faced when we hired persons with disabilities. And, now to answer your question, it will depend from business to business. Now, for example, if you're hiring, let's say people with the locomotive disability, so what kind of infrastructure or what kind of accessibility, conformance do you need to have? If you're hiring people with, let's say visual impairment or, other facets of diversity. So your accessibility conditions will also need to be modified, and that also needs to be a business case. So to start with, for organizations who are starting, let's say I'll take specific case of locomotive, people with locomotive disability. So here, one or two simple things that can be done in case, let's say we can start with, wheelchair ramps, which could be placed strategically in front of, let's say, the main entry and the exit points. Elevators could feature grab handles. Hallways could be wide enough. We can have special restrooms, or we can have auxiliary aids, to, let's say, facilitate training, certain interpreters. And in case of digital accessibility, and I'm talking of the starting point to start with, and I think, and I'm sure a lot of organizations, it's very, very easy, to do that. To start with, what we can do is, even if a simple, Microsoft Office, let's say 365, I think, I don't know how many people know that, Office 365, it is also one of the most accessible software for persons with disabilities. And I'm not going into technicalities of the other accessibility features that you can have. But I think for starting point, I'm saying, because hiring is something very important, and that should be followed by accessibility. So even Office 365 is one of the most accessible softwares, So let's say a person with visual impairment can use, a screen reader. Then there is a tell me, feature, I think, that assists with formatting. Then there are translators, there are sway features, there are dictate features. There are n number of features that you can find in the Microsoft 365 software itself. So these are very, very simple things that I'm telling you for organizations to start with. We can, of course, delve into details. There are so many, and when you read through the Right to Persons with Disabilities Act, you will find guidelines mentioned there when it comes to accessibility standards and digital accessibility. And you can also go through and I would love to share a link also, where you can go through the WCGA guidelines, where people can just confirm to that, and they can have their base ready to start hiring persons with disabilities.
Makes sense. I think post this webinar, we could share a number of links and resources that you mentioned to all the viewers today. Apart from the questions that are coming in here, there were about infrastructure, business case, and all of that. A lot of that which you already addressed. There were some questions that we collected while people registered. Some of which are very interesting, and I want to ask you those. So what is the tipping point at which focus on one aspect of diversity starts becoming a reverse bias, and how do we stay clear of it?
Okay.
Am I making it difficult?
No. So Jinal, can you repeat the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll repeat it.
I thought Priyanka is going to say out of syllabus.
No. I'm quite curious to understand this question. Yeah.
So, what is the tipping point at which focus on one aspect of diversity becomes a reverse bias, and how do we stay clear of it?
Okay, so okay, if you ask me, and if you ask me, to go by my experience, uh, I don't think there will be such a situation if your process and your procedures and your target areas are very well defined. So, different facets of diversity. So, if it's PWDs, if it's gender, if it's ACD, if it's GAL, if it's mature age, whatever. So you don't give it a chance. Now, see, you will need to define your policies, your processes, and your targeted engagement initiatives very, very clearly. So that, and you need to pay attention and your goals around each facet. So if you have these clear indicators with you, I don't think, there will ever be a chance of we getting into that situation, the question that you asked.
Makes sense. So I think overall having a bias-free environment will help us not go in that direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Don't leave
Even if
space
I
for
may come
anything.
in.
Yeah, clearly defined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think following that question, it's a lot about also having persons with disabilities grow in your organization. So how exactly do you evaluate their performance? Is it different for persons with disabilities, or how exactly does that happen? That's also a question that's coming.
Yes. I think it's a very great question. And to answer this question, no, there is no separate mechanism of evaluation for performance management. I'll keep this, keep on saying this, that when we have clearly defined in our equal employment opportunity policy that in no case, be it recruitment, be it training, be it performance management, be it hiring, be it X, there'll be no discrimination as far as our policies and our processes are concerned. There will be customized initiatives, engagement initiatives for them, and customized hiring initiatives. Yes, but discrimination in any way, no. The performance is also evaluated, in the same manner as we do it with for the rest of the 46,000 people that we have. So it's same. There is no difference at all.
Got it. And just moving on from that, do you have, do you also employ neurodiverse talent as well? And how has that journey been for you? That's also a question that's coming.
Yes. So at this point in time, no, because as far as our business is concerned, it has not given us a scope to venture into that aspect of diversity. So, and while I see organizations doing so much on neurodiversity, and I've been a part of groups where I keep learning about that, but to implement that, we have not yet started with that, and we hope to do it in future whenever business demands.
Makes sense. I think I'm going to take a pause on the Q&A because I do have a rapid fire, which also includes a Q&A, might answer some questions. Are we ready to begin? You might have to respond quickly on these ones because they're a rapid fire. Are we ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how would you respond to the following statement? Individuals with disabilities should be placed in jobs where they will not fail.
Not at all. Not at all. And again, I'll reiterate, because if we are following the equal employment opportunity policy, then we will definitely not let something like this happen. It's not that, they should be placed in jobs where they will not fail. No, equal employment opportunity means devoid of any discrimination. So it's an equal level playing field for all.
Makes sense. I love that answer. What comes first, accessible infrastructure or hiring employees with disabilities?
Okay. I think both run parallel, Jinal, but if you ask me, to rank in order, then I will be biased towards hiring, towards providing them gainful employment, and provide them with livelihood. And I think just open avenues for them. Rest, everything will follow.
I've heard Divyanshu speak about how we cannot fit into their shoes and experience the world. We should have them in and let them help us guide us through the whole process. The next question, it's about true or false. Only a select few industries are able to hire persons with disabilities. True or false?
False. This could be true a couple of years ago, but today it's definitely false. Yes, the entry barriers, could be different. For example, let's say if we talk of an industry like us, probably the entry barrier could be a bit easier as compared to other industries, but which requires specific skills. But today, I think a lot of industries are able to hire persons with disabilities, and with so much of upskilling, with so much of free hire training that's available, I think we all stand in equal footing when it comes to hiring.
And I have a final question for you. As a DNI champion and a champion of inclusion, what is your biggest learning so far?
Yeah. One learning. So I think that there are so many learnings, Jinal, but I think as far as I'm concerned, I am in awe of the way, these persons with disabilities, they evolve, during their journey. So, their quality of output, their performance, their learnings, their discipline, and the way they talk to the managers, to understand things better and sort it out and make it happen. So I think they kind of create a very an example for me to follow personally, and there are so many examples like this within our organization.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. I think the amount of knowledge you have in this area is so much. We might require a part 2 series of this webinar, but I really enjoyed myself. I would like to invite Sandhya to give some closing remarks, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well towards the end. Thanks, Sandhya.
Anything from you before we close?
So I think, I don't know, time just flew by, and Sandhya and Jinal, you've been great hosts. And I think the kind of questions, that made me think also. And I think I just love the session. And, and it's not that just because I'm sitting in this Great Place to Work webinar, that I'm talking, but I think organizations like Great Place to Work, when we participate in, things like an Understand Inclusion Index, those sort of outreach programs also have created a big advantage for organizations like us, because we have never partnered with organizations which do this kind of study. So for us, last year also, this was the first of its kind study that came across, and that's the reason we also we want to continue this partnership and this learnings from this study. And kudos to the work that you do, Gina. Kudos to the work that you do, Sandhya. I keep seeing, the posts from Great Place to Work, diversity and inclusion, and I just love that. And happy to partner with you in whatever way, we can move this needle.
Thank you. We're so humble, Priyanka, and like I mentioned, I said, I'm definitely walking away with, I would say, a multitude of learnings. You've just been able to kind of decode and demystify this entire, community that we call persons with disability or disability inclusion into the workplace in such a, simple fashion. And if I had to look at it, one, being able to acknowledge, I would say, just the entire piece around structural requirements for persons with disability. And I think taking a step-by-step process on that can help the organization move forward in that journey. I think the second thing that you spoke about is don't underestimate the need to create awareness, sensitization, and keep doing that. It is a continuous process, right? I think the third piece that you spoke about is, while you definitely recognize the uniqueness, don't create systems and barriers which will differentiate, especially even within your processes. So while it's important to create equitable practices and have equitable processes, it may not be necessary to differentiate everything to create a sense of discrimination or inequality within the system. Just like, do we have to have jobs outlined, or do we have to have developmental programs outlined? I think that was another key takeaway. And I'd say the last but equally important key takeaway was, how do you keep recontextualizing all of this for your business? I think putting it in perspective, I loved the dashboard that you spoke about, that acts as a feed forward into your own DEI journey from time to time. And I think being able to continuously have business engaged in this conversation, needless to say, also ensures that we're able to multiply our impact. So Priyanka, thank you as always for indulging us in such an such a enthusiastic conversation. And while this webinar is of course going to be available for everyone to watch and refer to, I think there could be some resources, Priyanka, that some of the audience have requested us to share back with them. So we will have our team maybe write out to you, request for that information, and share it with the audience. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandhya.
Thank you, Gina.